Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like and subscribe. Keep rocking. Okay, folks, let's have a little bit of fun. You've gotten a lot of really sad and horrible news stories from me, so let's have some chuckles and watch a couple of clips from this. I'll give you a little preamble. Last week, I spoke about a woman named Anna Kasparian who works for the Young Turks, and how she is one of the inspirations of me getting into, podcasting about the news. And it wasn't a positive inspiration. It was kind of a negative inspiration because she, who had once been a progressive, a stalwart progressive, who I actually looked up to, has taken a rightward turn, has become I'm not going to say a defender of Donald Trump, but quite a centrist. And she and her co-host, the creator of the Young Turks, which they both work. His name is Cenk Uygur, and I'm sure that if you're listening to my voice, you probably are familiar with Cenk Uygur. Anyway, both of them have done this kind of, mea culpa, going around talking to right-wingers, telling them how sorry that they are, and that let's work together, even though, he goes out there with his hand out and they slap him around. I figured he would have learned this from Donald Trump's first term, but he has not. Anyway, Cenk Uygur has he's loud, he's boisterous, and I will give him credit on some things. When he talks about Palestine and what's going on, with Israel bombing the shit out of Gaza, he's hell on wheels. And you put him on like a centristy kind of show with Pierce Morgan, he's a badass, and he'll throw down. And Cenk is known for being a screamer and a yeller, and he gets really angry about shit. And that's kind of one of the reasons why he became so damn popular, is because he was an unapologetic progressive back in the day. Now, keep in mind, Cenk Uygur wasn't always progressive. Back in the 90s, he was a Republican. And then he saw the error of his ways. He realized that Republicans don't really stand for, America first kind of shit. And that, he just didn't really work with them as well as he used to back when he was younger. And he went progressive. Well, like I said, recently he has kind of gone very centrist along with Anna Kasparian. And he has gone into a handful of debates with different people. And he keeps saying the same stuff over and over again, and progressives that he has now, interestingly enough, when he has a debate or a conversation with a right winger, he is all kid gloves, and he's soft and he's gentle with them, and he's trying to win them over, which, by the way, does not work. It doesn't work. You cannot talk to somebody who is just too far fucking gone and try to bring them back from the brink of a MAGA cult. It's just not going to work. So many of the progressives that he argues with, he's much tougher, much meaner with progressives who are ostensibly on his side. And they're like, look, just work with Democrats, work with, centrist Dems. If you want to win them over to the progressive side, work with centrist Dems. If you're trying to, bridge the gap, find some independents, bridge that gap, as opposed to just going all the way over to MAGA, because it's not going to work. Anyway, he's had multiple debates with different people, although he's still scared shitless of debating Sam Cedar, which, Sam would smack him around, and Cenk is not prepared to do that. But he and Kyle Kulinski, who I'm a big fan of, Kyle and he started one of the very first progressive campaigns that got AOC elected. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, all those people got elected under their banner. And Kyle is and his wife Krystal Ball and Cenk Uygur have a bit of a debate on the Krystal, Kyle and Friends show. And Cenk, who they were friends. He and Kyle were friends. Cenk and these two have quite a heated debate. I don't know if I'm going to make it through the whole 41 minutes here, but you'll get the point pretty quickly.
joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, oh, you want to explain? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, Cenk reached out to Kyle and I this week and said, hey, I think we got some things to talk through. Can I, let's have a conversation. So we said, sure, let's do that. And this kind of follows on the heels of a discussion/debate that you and I had back in December, where, the launching point, and you can, correct me if you don't think that this is a fair characterization of this conversation, but the launching point was a tweet that you had put out expressing some optimism about the Trump administration. So we can put that tweet up on the screen from Cenk to refresh everybody's memory about where.
By the way, she is totally big dogging him right now. Which, I'm pretty sure that Cenk is probably feeling already a little bit of hostility, even though she's being very gentle with him. But, she's like, you reached out to me about ironing some of this stuff out. So we are, we humbly agreed to have you on our show. And here, by the way, before you go off on a tangent about what you really meant, let me show you a post of what you said earlier. I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election, even though I was so against the guy who won. I know now MAGA is not my mortal enemy, and neither is the extreme left. He would consider me, Kyle, and Krystal, the extreme left because, I don't know, because we want health care. I don't know. And they have been defeated. The establishment is my mortal enemy, and they've been defeated. No, they haven't. Donald Trump is in the office. He's surrounded by the establishment. The former president of the United States is absolutely the establishment. Anyway, sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
So you said in November 29th, 2024, I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election. Even though I was so against the guy who won, I know now MAGA is not my mortal enemy, neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment, and they have been defeated. So over the course of that conversation, you explained to me that the reason you felt optimistic was really two reasons. Number one, as you say there, the establishment was defeated. And number two, you felt that the elements of the populist right and the bros would hold Trump accountable. And it kind of built to this crescendo where he actually turned to the camera and said, listen, guys, in a little while, you're going to be able to say whether I was right or whether Krystal was right. Let's go ahead and play that portion as a refresher. That is element number two.
I want to address something to the audience. Can I?
Sure.
Is this my camera here? Okay, yeah. So right-wing populists, it is now your job to prove Krystal wrong. Okay.
Go out and do it, y'all.
So she doesn't believe you. And by the way, almost no one on the left, other than me and Anna, believe you guys that
Me
you
either.
actually want to cut the Pentagon. And that you could pressure Elon Musk and Donald Trump to cut the Pentagon. So are you going to prove the left wrong, or are you going to prove them spectacularly right? Am I going to have to come on here and apologize to Krystal for ever believing in any right-wing populist and say, oh, I was a sucker, those guys were liars, all they want to do was increase the Pentagon, have more wars, more corruption, and they never held Trump accountable. We waited 4 long years for them to hold him accountable, and all they did was kiss his ass and show that they don't really believe in freedom. They said all this stuff about freedom, but they never meant it. They said all this stuff about drain the swamp, but they never meant it. They said all this anti-war stuff, but they never meant it. We're going to come back on here in 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, and we're going to keep doing a check.
So, Cenk, that was kind of the context of that discussion. And just for the audience and for you, since there's two of us and one of you, and we don't want to be like jumping on all over each other, and maybe Kyle and I have disagreements on things, I thought I would kind of handle the first 30 minutes more or less. Kyle would handle the second 30 minutes. You've got a engagement you've got to go to, hard out in an hour, so that's the amount of time that we have.
We could do this for 4 hours if we had the time.
I'm sure we could, and it would be painful for all involved. But in any case, we've got a hard out for Cenk in 1 hour. We want to be very respectful of his time. So with everything that's happened in Trump 2.0, do you still feel that original optimism that you expressed at the time, do you still feel that was well-founded?
Absolutely. And part of the reason I wanted to come on is to see if you guys are on planet Earth or live in an alternate reality.
Wow. I mean, look, I just said that Krystal kind of big dog him by putting all of that stuff, right up front, which, by the way, you kind of needed the context. You can't just jump into the middle of a debate. But the first thing he says, I just wanted to make sure that you guys are still on planet Earth. Okay, all right. His shade is a little bit more obvious.
And I'm not trying to be insulting.
Yes, you are.
Figure it out. I'm being genuine about it. And so and Chris, I went back and watched our conversation from back then.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Yeah, you kept saying like things against Trump. And that's why I didn't even think it was a debate. It was a discussion because I was like, yeah, I totally agree with you on Trump and the Republicans, et cetera. I was talking about the populist right and the independents that voted for Trump, the actual voters. And you saw it in that clip. I don't address Trump. I don't address any Republicans. I address the voters. So what has happened since then? Joe Rogan has come out against what Trump has done with Mahmoud Halil, with Abrego Garcia. Almost all of the MAGA hosts have come out against the war, ranging from Tucker Carlson.
By the way, that sentiment right there, which this was recorded just a couple of days ago, that is aged like milk, because all of those people are now, all of them are on the Trump train. Dropping bombs is good, baby. You know, war with Iran, let's do it.
Bannon. Then you've got the politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene. You've got Tim Dillon. You've got.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Cenk Uygur had Marjorie Taylor Greene on the Young Turks. He interviewed her and he gave her a very gentle and easy interview. So, I mean, like I said, when he talks to right-wingers, he treats them with kid gloves. When he talks to progressives like this, he is a little bit harder, and you're going to see.
I'm not sure you can name a right-wing MAGA host or independent host that's for the war in Iran. So
Charlie Kirk.
So I'm genuinely curious. Like, are you guys not seeing that, or does that somehow magically not count?
So, Cenk, I have the same question as to whether or not you're on planet Earth. Because, first of all, let me ask you this question. Do you think that Trump 2.0 is better or worse than Trump 1.0?
Trump is irrelevant.
No, he's not irrelevant, because I'll tell you why. Here's why. You expressed optimism about how all this would go. And the reason you were optimistic is because,
you're
hold on.
misunderstanding.
No, we just saw your tweet, okay? The reason you were optimistic
I can explain the tweet.
is because you thought these various groups and influencers would hold him accountable. So did they constrain his behavior, for example, when Elon Musk was running around with a chainsaw, slashing Social Security and gutting the federal government and gutting the CFPB? No, we didn't. In fact, we saw Joe Rogan host Elon Musk, not to mention Mark Zuckerberg and Mark Andreessen, to make the case for those things, okay? No accountability there. Did we see them constrain his behavior and hold him accountable when he launched a crypto shitcoin, the most corrupt scheme in American history, most likely? No, he did it. He's faced no accountability for that. You mentioned some dissent from Rogan on the kidnapping of college students off of college campuses. Is it the right that organized in opposition to that? No, it's the left and it's liberals. The only time that Trump's actions have been constrained at all in this Trump 2.0 era, which is vastly worse than I even expected when you and I had that conversation. I mean, we've got men in hundreds of people in a concentration camp. I didn't see any accountability from the right on that. I don't see any accountability from the right on an American city that is right now under invasion by our own troops, Marines on the ground in the city of LA. No, I don't see any accountability there. I see an administration that, as I predicted, the guardrails are completely off. And the only places where he has been constrained at all is when the left and liberals organized against Elon Musk, Tesla protests, showing up at town halls, etc., made him toxic. He had to be turfed out of the administration. And in the context of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, when you had mass left liberal resistance, even pushing Democratic leaders who were lame and weak to do something, Chris Van Hollen goes down to El Salvador, and the administration did something they did not want to do, which was to bring him back. That is the only time this administration has been constrained. It has had nothing to do with the right, had everything to do with liberals and the left organizing against him.
Also, and look, Cenk, look at him, man. He looks like he's about to burst. Cenk is going to, kind of obfuscate a little bit and shift from the MAGA influencers to the MAGA voters. By the way, you seeing a lot of MAGA voters out there protesting in LA? Did you see a lot of MAGA voters up in arms about Mahmoud Khalil or Abrego Garcia? I have a majority of my family is very conservative, and I have spoken to family members, and not one of them has said anything about the unlawful arrest by ICE or has said anything about the bombing in Iran or or anything regarding cutting Medicaid and Medicare. None of them have said anything, and those are Trump supporting MAGA voters. Not one of them has said anything bad about anything that Donald Trump has done. And it's quite obviously very fascistic shit that he's doing. And they're either ignoring it or they're okay with it. I'm not saying that all of my family is okay with it, but I think that it's very easy for a Republican voter to just ignore this stuff. But you sure as shit aren't seeing them out on the street protesting against it and pushing their, right-wing pundits and podcasters or pushing their right-wing politicians or even Donald Trump. But Cenk is going to go, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the MAGA voters. Well, I just explained to you, just an anecdotal experience, but I don't see a lot of MAGA voters up in arms about anything that Donald Trump is doing.
Yeah, that's hilarious. You asked about 12 questions. I would love the time to answer it, but you didn't actually
Those are
answer
statements,
my question.
Cenk.
Do you see a massive MAGA revolt against the war? And I'm being
No.
genuine. It's a literal question. Or do you just not see it?
Cenk,
Don't see it.
here's what I can tell you. Okay, Charlie Kirk, your buddy. He has
He's
already.
not my buddy.
He has
Krystal, don't
already
say that.
gone.
Yeah, but you did go on his show and you went out on stage with him and you did a little interview with him. And I remember 5 years ago, Charlie Kirk was screaming at you when you were doing a stage talk. And he's like, I'm a capitalist. I live like a capitalist every day. Sank.
He has
That's a
already
ridiculous
gone.
thing to say.
He's
Go
already
ahead,
gone
finish it.
from. He's already gone from being critical of the Iran war to guess what? He got a call from the White House, and now what he's saying? What's he saying? Oh, I trust Trump. Trump is the man for this moment. I know he's going to make the right decision.
The exact
Steve
quote
Bannon.
is,
Go
can I
ahead.
give the exact quote?
Yeah.
This is from Charlie Kirk. Quote, we must trust Trump in this situation. Go ahead with Steve Bannon.
So
Steve
you're not
Bannon.
seeing
Hold
it.
on. Steve Bannon. Put up element number 4. This is the Financial Times today. Steve Bannon says, if the president, as commander-in-chief, makes a decision to do this, the MAGA movement, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Matt Gaetzes, we will fight it up till the end. But if he has more intelligence and makes that case to the American people, the MAGA movement will support President Trump. When Trump says that he gets to define what America first is, he's right about that. And so when you have Bannon,
not.
who also was critical of Elon Musk originally and got a call from the White House and said, cut it out, and he bent the knee, these people time and time again, Cenk, all they do is ultimately when Trump makes a decision, they bend the knee. We are already far enough into this administration to know there has been no constraint on his action that has come from the right. None. And we're in a war
I
with
gotta jump
Iran.
in. Okay.
We are already
Okay.
in a war with Iran. They didn't constrain him here. He's doing whatever the hell he wants to do.
Okay, so you guys just spoke for like 8 minutes doing a straw man. Okay, so you make it sound, and this is what's so harmful. You guys make it sound like I'm pro-Trump, and I think
No,
that
that's not
MAGA
what she
is just
said.
A bunch of angels who are secretly left-wing, and they're going to magically agree with us on.
Now who's
every
doing a
issue.
straw man?
And the minute that Trump does something wrong, they're going to all push back 100%. And that's what I believed. I believed in rainbows and unicorns. Of course not, Krystal. Of course not. Well, you're trying to move them. Moving the other side is super hard. And so when you see something, anything where they actually agree with us, you have to encourage that. So when you say all the things that you said, is Trump a bad guy? Of course, of course. So if you're listening out here, guys, the framing of all of this is totally wrong. Like, we're having a conversation. Do you think Trump's a bad? Of course I think Trump's a bad guy. He's totally authoritarian. That's why I voted against him. That's why I worked so hard against him. So even the framing makes me like sound defensive when you guys started with a premise that's out in la la land.
Honey, they quoted you. They literally quoted you, and they showed a clip of an interview that You are having a hard time defending your own goddamn words in this, Cenk. Jesus Christ, man.
Totally oppose Trump. So now the second part of the premise that's totally wrong is, do I think that MAGA is going to revolt on every issue against Trump from day one? Why? Why would they? They love Trump.
They haven't revolted on one of them, Don. I mean, Cenk. Not one.
That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for, is there one or two issues where there is actual agreement, and can we take that agreement and do something interesting to restrain Trump in those issues? So when you talk about immigration...
And so when has that worked?
Okay, hold on. Well, we're in the middle of it right now. So
we're at war with Iran, Cenk. Hate to break it to you. We're at war with Iran. It didn't work.
Okay. So, Krystal, let me finish. So when you talk about immigration and all the things that he's terrible on, I know what MAGA's movable on or not. I talk about it on the Young Turks all the time. If you think you're going to move them on immigration, you are nuts. They're not going to move an inch on immigration.
They never said that.
So I fight him tooth and nail on that dungeon in El Salvador that they're sending people to, the Marines in the streets. Now, there's some issues like immigration where they haven't moved an inch and they never will move an inch, right? Mm-hmm. There's some issues like the Marines in the streets where a smattering of them are like, this is a little uncomfortable. It feels a little unconstitutional. It doesn't feel quite right. Those libertarian wing, remember guys, this is super important. There's 77 million people that voted for Trump, right? If you treat them all the same, you will not be able to win elections. Why is winning elections important? Because that is how you take power away from Trump.
Man, listen to the condescension in his voice.
So if you treat all 77 million as hardcore MAGA, you're going to push them away and they're going to vote against you. You can say, oh, no, but it makes me feel better. I have emotional release and my audience likes
who's
me
doing
more
the straw
because I
man,
seem like
Cenk?
I'm tougher on Trump. I was so mean to him. Yeah, but did that persuade anybody? I called all of his voters fascists. Yes, but did that persuade anyone? You're trying to persuade the people in the middle to come to your side. So what are the issues where we've got a fighter's chance? War. Okay. So now, do I think that on day one, they were all going to flip and then act and be successful in stopping all of the establishment, all the neocons? And by the way, were we successful? We were not successful in stopping any of them during Biden or any other Democratic administration either, right? So now there's a giant full-blown revolt from MAGA against this war.
Citation needed, Cenk. That is not happening. Boy, talk about reading The Secret and trying to wish some shit into existence. My God, man.
You're saying, no, I don't see Tucker Carlson, Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Posobiec, Cernovich, Candace Owens, etc., all of them opposed to the war. But you might not, because a lot of people watch programming that honestly just kind of gives them a misleading sense of what's happening.
Did you see Tucker, Trump saying, Tucker called me to apologize. He said he went too far. Did you see Steve Bannon saying, we're all going to fall in line ultimately? So I'm not talking about, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the however many million Americans voted for Trump, some of whom are hardcore MAGA, and you will never move them. And I guarantee you, the moment that Trump says this is the policy, they're going to say, you're right, sir, this is the policy, this is brilliant, and I am on board. Are there independents that can are there independents that can be moved? Yes. There are two separate questions here, okay? Number one is we are in hell right now. Like, the level of damage that has been done to this country, done to the world from Trump 2.0 already is astounding. So the number one thing is triage, right? How do we stop?
That's what I'm doing.
How do we stop as much damage as we can? And the track record thus far in the Trump administration is the only time he has been constrained is through the left and liberals banding together and going through the court system and public pressure. That's it.
Why are you shaking your head, you fucking moron? Honey, Abrego Garcia didn't get home because right-wingers were saying some shit and right-wing politicians were doing some shit. It was because lefties were putting up a stink. You don't see any right-wingers at the protest at the ICE facility in LA. Those are all lefties. All the people yelling and screaming at the town halls, at their Republican representatives. The majority of them are liberals. All of the people at the protests for the No Kings protest, I'm seeing just wine moms out there with Luigi shirts on, man. Those are the people that are fighters. It's not the Republican people. None of them.
What we've seen in this administration. The other question
Okay, can I
is
address
how
that?
do you win elections? So go ahead and address that, and then we can talk about the election piece. But real quick, before you get in, as to the earnestness of this MAGA anti-war movement, put element number 3 up on the screen. Do you know? Tell me, how many Republicans have signed on to the War Powers Resolution?
One.
Is Marjorie Taylor Greene? No. Is Lauren Boebert there? No. One. Thomas Massey, a libertarian who is, ideologically consistent, kind of similar ideologically to Dave Smith. Every other person here is a Democrat. So
Yeah,
to
I
the
know that.
earnestness of this anti-war MAGA coalition and their commitment
But you keep
to blocking war with
conflating, Krystal.
Iran,
You drive me crazy.
here is where the rubber meets the road. You have
Yeah.
one Republican who is already at odds with Trump, who is willing to put his name on this war powers resolution. That's it.
So, Krystal, look, I know you don't mean it, but you keep conflating two things. The Republican politicians, including Trump, and the Republican voters, or the people who voted for Trump, okay? So are the Republican politicians corrupt? Of course they're corrupt. Are they going to say, hey, Israel, I'll be your bitch, and I'll do whatever the hell you want me to do? Of course they are. They're completely owned by Israel, okay? So AIPAC, et cetera, the warmongers, by the way, let's be honest, is more than half the Democratic Party totally owned by AIPAC? Yes, right? So I oh my God, oh no, you can't be honest. You have to just say the other side is terrible and our side is angels. No, I'm not going to play that.
Would you
That's
rather?
nonsense.
But would you rather be on the side of the 37 who signed onto the War Powers Resolution,
But,
or
Krystal,
the
I am on
one?
the side of the 37. Everything you frame is a straw man. I am on the side of the 37. In fact, Ro Khanna is my top ally. Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna and I had the same exact strategy that you criticized in November when we talked.
Yeah, the only difference here, Cenk, is that Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders are actual representatives of our democracy. They can write bills. They can submit them. They can speak on the House and the Senate floor. You are a pundit. There is a difference between you and them.
You literally put me, no, and Kyle did the same thing. You guys put me in the same bucket as Bernie and Ro, reaching out to see if we can find agreement on the
But
right.
what else?
You're right,
But what
we are
else
in the
has
same
Bernie
bucket.
done? What else has Bernie done that has been profoundly impactful? The anti-oligarch, the Fight Oligarchy tour, which was
That's
an
what
effort
I
to
do for
bind
a
together
living.
the left.
Bullshit, Cenk. You are trying to play patty cake with right-wing pundits, trying to win over some of their viewers, because your viewership has dropped considerably in the last year or so. And now you are looking for some fall-off right-wing viewers to come over and watch the Young Turks. I mean, hell, man, the only person on your program these days that's actually doing any business is John Idarola. You and Anna have fallen off. So to say that you are, doing the same thing as Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is out there getting crowds of like 30,000 fucking people who are fed up with Donald Trump, and he can actually go back to Washington and affect some change. You, on the other hand, are playing patty cake with Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson and Marjorie fucking Taylor Greene. Jesus Christ, Cenk.
And the liberals to protest and to resist this administration, and that has been profoundly more
Krystal, you're
impactful.
having a conversation with a person who isn't here.
Did the Pentagon budget get cut? Just tell me that. What's the Pentagon
So-
budget?
no, but
Did it
Krystal,
get
hold
cut?
on. You've now asked me 28
Did Don,
questions.
did
Let
Don
me answer
Jr.
them.
Did he do whatever
Okay.
with the generals? Did that work out?
All right, guys, look, I came on here because, look, you're generally fair. So you asked me 28 questions.
I think they're being
and then
fair.
Let me answer them. So, and stop framing it as if I'm a different person. You keep making all these assumptions about who I am. Oh, are you on the Republican side or the Democrat?
I'm literally
No, I'm
She
citing
on the
didn't
things
say
Democrat
that.
you said, Cenk. Like, I played your clip
Okay, oh,
of what you
Jesus
said.
Christ, man.
Turn to the camera.
Okay,
Hey,
I'm
tell me if
right
I'm
here,
wrong.
Krystal.
This
Krystal,
specifically,
I'm right here. I'm
Cenk.
right here. Can I talk for myself instead of you?
You
like, at
specifically
point-
held on the
well,
Pentagon budget.
At this point, borderline lying about me in every framing of every question. Can I
How am
actually
I
be a
lying?
human being named
How am I
Cenk
lying?
Uygur
Tell
actually
me how I'm
answer your
lying.
questions instead of you framing
Tell me how I'm lying,
me as a
Cenk.
person that doesn't exist?
If you can't argue the point, you argue the procedure. Cenk is doing classic, argumentative tactics. I cannot argue with the truths that you are saying, so I'm going to argue with the way you are presenting the truth.
Cenk,
Okay.
I played the clip of you talking, so tell me how I'm lying.
Okay. All right. So now, of all your questions, you have this fantasy land that Trump was like, oh, the left thinks Abrego Garcia's, I've treated him wrong. I surrender, left. Come on, what planet do you live on?
She didn't say
no,
that.
The courts are not left or right. The courts have held. I'm thrilled that the courts have held. And it was so important for the courts to hold. So if they didn't hold on that, he was going to have unlimited authoritarian power. And we are against that, no matter how many times people try to pretend that we're on the side of Trump. Listen to what I am actually saying, and you will see this every day on the Young Turks. I am against Trump. Totally. Okay. Now, okay. Yes, but why do you love Trump will be the next question. Okay.
Did I ask
So-
that?
Jesus
Cenk,
Christ,
Talk
Cenk.
about a
now,
straw
hold on.
man.
Talk about a
I
straw
can't
man.
Making up stuff I never
Let me answer
said.
your questions.
Come
What's
on.
the point of coming on here if I can't answer your
Jake,
questions?
I'm giving you plenty of time to answer, brother. You're
Okay.
making up stuff about me. I didn't say that.
Okay,
So you want to
Jesus
talk about
Christ,
straw men?
Krystal.
You're
This is,
inventing
it's
things
a
on the
mistake
spot.
talking to you guys. It's a mistake. So, okay, now, when you're talking about the Pentagon cuts, you
By the way, keep in mind, that's Kyle Kulinski's wife right there. And Cenk he's kind of disrespecting her pretty hard. And Kyle is just keeping chill. I am surprised he hasn't popped off yet. Let's see. Does Kyle pop off anytime soon here? Just kind of curious. I kind of want to jump into this, just jump ahead a little bit. Let's see.
so Krystal,
No
are
one
you
in this
saying-
room talks more to MAGA
So-
than I do, okay?
Yeah, okay, but okay, so are you saying that none of the the MAGA voters were
Yeah, by the way, Krystal hosts the show, and her co-host is MAGA. So Cenk was just saying, I'm sorry I skipped over, but Cenk was just saying that, he talks to more conservatives and MAGA than anybody. And it's like, honey, Krystal literally hosts a show with a MAGA guy. And honestly, she spanks his ass on the regular, but that's a different story. Anyway,
that they added to the Pentagon? Is that what you're
They
saying?
don't give a shit
I'm
because
saying
Trump did it.
Elon and
Yeah,
Trump.
no, you guys were wrong.
Elon
They
and
didn't
Trump
like
and
that at
Don
all.
Jr. Cenk lied to you from the beginning when they
course
pretended
they
like there
did.
was even a 1% chance of it. So when people told you at the time, though, resist them outright and point out that they're frauds.
Okay,
Don't
so
pretend like
this
maybe
is
they'll
so
cut it.
stupid.
That was kind of the point.
You guys have a totally ridiculous, All right, let me not be insulting.
Oh,
we disagree on
a little
strategy,
late.
Okay.
Definitely,
so,
yes.
Okay, yeah. This whole idea that you're making a difference because Donald Trump is listening to the left, I can't believe you guys think that. That sounds totally detached from reality.
I'll make
So
that case
why
in a
is
minute.
Why is Elon Musk out? Because people burn Tesla cars? I mean, Krystal, you said that in the intro. Are you serious? No, Elon's out because his policies were always deeply unpopular. No one wanted those cuts.
Yeah,
Deep
and who
MAGA
pressed that
wanted
case?
them, and they're in
Cenk,
La La
and who,
Land.
Cenk, and who pressed that case?
The
It was
left
the
and
left and
liberals
liberals
in the street.
Joe Rogan hosted him on his podcast to pump
Yeah,
him up.
guys,
Joe Rogan,
guys,
think
you're
about,
doing this-
but Cenk, think
You're
about
doing
this.
this
Think about this.
unbelievable straw man.
Think,
You're
no,
doing
no,
this-
no, no.
Hold on, can I just
I'm not,
finish?
let me
No.
just finish my thought here, okay? Rogan hosted Zuckerberg and Andreessen to attack
Of
the
course he did.
CFPB.
Of course he did.
gut and
You think
attack
he's
the
gonna be a Bernie
CFPB?
Sanders progressive overnight?
No,
Are
but
you
it's-
insane? No, guys.
Are you
have this
insane?
straw
You were the
man
one who apparently
that I
thought that.
said-
Yes.
No, but
If anything is
Krystal,
going
do
to
you
be
really think
populist,
that I thought
hold
that it-
on, Cenk. Let me finish a thought.
Damn, Mom.
Anything, if the populist right stands for anything, you would think it would be an anti-scam bureau that is wildly effective. But no, and actually stood up against debanking conservatives. But no, what did Rogan do, and what did they cheer for with Elon with the chainsaw? Completely gutting not only the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Trump gutting the National Labor Relations Board, but them defenestrating the ability of this government to enforce white-collar crime at all. Did MAGA care? No, they didn't. The only people that held them to account were left and liberals who organized against that, and yes, successfully made Elon so toxic that he ultimately crashed out of the administration. That's what.
I mean, honestly, she is absolutely not wrong about that. You know, Elon went out there with his millions of dollars into Wisconsin trying to, you know, buy a right-wing conservative judge for their Wisconsin Supreme Court. And he got his ass spanked by over 10 points. It didn't matter how many millions of dollars he brought. And Donald Trump, if one thing Donald Trump hates is a loser. And Elon Musk went down there, he put a little cheese wheel hat on his head, and he went down with his chainsaw and his millions of dollars and tried to buy votes, which, by the way, how fucking illegal is that? I mean, my God. But he still got his ass beat. And Donald Trump was like, I hate fucking losers. It wasn't any right-wingers down there fighting against this. It was the left. The left fought back against Elon, showed Donald Trump what a fucking loser he hired, and Trump got rid of his ass. It wasn't MAGA. It wasn't any pundits. It sure as shit wasn't Joe Rogan, who kept inviting Elon Musk. Joe Rogan moved to fucking Texas because of Elon Musk.
So let me try explaining it this way and see if I can get through to you guys. So you keep telling me all the things that Trump did wrong. Of course he did. So I'm saying that it's a given that he's always going to do, for example, 90% of things massively wrong. And in the other 10% that he plans to do wrong, I'm saying we have a fighter's chance if we ally and we show hypocrisy, or we get allies. It's a win-win either way, okay? So for example, in opposing the war, either they become our allies and somehow at some point we stop this war, or we show, oh, you guys never meant it. Now you're the pro-war party, which makes us much more likely to win over independents and win the next election.
Okay, I think I got it now. I think I understand where Cenk is coming from. Cenk is doing the classic hypocrisy shaming, which, by the way, does not work and has never worked. You know, I remember Hillary Clinton going, America's already great. You know, trying to hypocrisy shame the voters is not going to work. You know, he thinks that he can pull off 10% out of the other, you know, out of the 100% of Trump voters, he feels like he can pull 10% out with hypocrisy shaming. It does not work that way, man. I guarantee you, a right-winger who agrees with Donald Trump 90% of the time is going to go into that voting booth and go, you know, he didn't do this one thing, this 10% I don't like, but he's with me on the other 90%, so I'm going to go with him. Hypocrisy shaming is not going to win you fucking voters, Cenk.
But as I say that, you keep framing it as if I agree with them 90%. And where I think that I'm going to flip them overnight on the 90% where we disagree. No, there's no chance of that. So you can stop asking that question. They're not going to move on cutting the budget, and they're not going to listen that, hey, you know what, you shouldn't cut the malaria treatment in Africa. You shouldn't cut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because every dollar we spend there, we get back $20.
Yeah, but he makes the liberals cry, and they vote for that over whether or not you're sending AIDS medication to Africans. They don't give a fuck about that. They don't care, Cenk.
But if you go with your maximalist approach, guys, and you say, all right, I'm fighting you in a maximum way, so that means I'm never going to agree with you. I'm going to insult you at every turn. I'm not going to listen to you. So when you come in and you go, hey, guys, let's ally against the war, or maybe did you think that Elon's and I said this in every right-wing talk show that I did, and I said it at the Charlie Kirk event, I said, remember, beware of your own donors like Elon Musk. And then eventually they got aware of their own donors. Now, did they do it magically and overnight? No, it was mainly a fight between Elon and Trump, right? And it was their
of
egos.
course.
And,
It had nothing to do with Charlie
and
Kirk.
the reason they are unpopular is not because the left's maximalist approach of yelling fascist at every Trump voter is working. It's because their policies are deeply unpopular.
And who
about
explains
a
that their
straw man.
policies are deeply unpopular? The left and liberals are the ones that highlight how deeply unpopular those policies are. So that's where the credit belongs.
Like I do. So
Right, but that's not like Joe Rogan does, right? Joe Rogan doesn't do that. Charlie Kirk doesn't do that. They don't do that.
I said how unpopular they are.
Yeah,
It's
but
like,
my
it's
point
amazing.
is, Joe Rogan and Charlie Kirk don't do that, Cenk. They're not allies. Joe Rogan and Charlie Kirk don't do that. Steve Bannon doesn't do that. Sloppy Steve goes and gives Trump a hand job every day. That's the point, is that they're not allies. And by the way, even on the Iran war thing, they're lying. They are lying. We literally have the quotes right here.
They're not.
Charlie Kirk is already backpedaling. Quote, we must trust Trump in this situation. Steve Bannon, if Trump ultimately decides to bomb Iran's nuclear sites, MAGA would come around. That's not me speaking, that's Steve Bannon. The vast majority of the MAGA movement will go, look, we trust your judgment. We don't like it. In fact, we may hate it, but we'll get on board. Tucker Carlson called Trump and apologized, and he also said on his podcast with Steve Bannon, quote, I like Israel. I don't talk about Gaza because my audience got mad at me. He said, quote, watching Donald Trump, who at his core is sincere about peace, I feel for President Trump, and he just has to roll with it. That is not true. What he's saying is not true. These are not allies. They will immediately start moving the goalposts as soon as Trump starts bombing Iran.
Here we go again.
You're going to get this. You're going to get, oh, he's getting bad advice from the neocons around him. It's not a big deal. It's a limited attack. It's defensive. It's not offensive. This isn't like Iraq. There are no boots on the ground. The only people who are sincere that I will grant you, Cenk, is libertarians, so Thomas Massey and Dave Smith, because libertarians have a track record, like Ron Paul did, of being very principled, but everybody in MAGA, or 99% of them, will bend the knee, just like 99% of the ones in Congress have already bent the knee. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's saying things that are against the war, she's ultimately not signing on to the bill to block the war.
Okay, so here we go again. So again, 90-10, guys. The framing of that question makes it sound like I think Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson have good intent, and my God, they're ready to rebel on everything against Donald Trump.
I said Iran.
No.
I said Iran.
Can I just answer a question?
But I didn't say that. I said Iran.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. So I think that obviously 90% of the influencers, the hosts, etc., are going to stick with Trump 100%, right? Well, I wouldn't even say 90%. I'd say, 75% or so.
I'd say 100%.
Kiss his ass on everything. Well, of course they are. They're on the right, and their whole ecosystem is based on kissing politicians and leaders' asses. Now, let's be honest, not us and not you guys, but MSNBC and now a lot of online hosts on the left, their job is to kiss the Democratic ass, and they say, oh, yeah, Joe Biden was young and dynamic, etc. So, yes, we have the partisans, and they are, by definition, always going to stick with one side is great, the other side is the devil, okay? So now when you get to the 25% of hosts, because now the reason I moved it from 10 to 25, because you're including Rogan, et cetera. So is Rogan the same as Steve Bannon? If you think he is, that's just totally wrong. Now, do they agree on a lot of things? Yes. Do they agree on everything? No. Does Steve Bannon right about most things? No, he's horribly, horribly wrong about most things. So will they, when Trump says heal, will they heal? In the beginning, yes, and that's exactly what you're seeing. But the reason they're having to heal is because they started rebelling in the first place. And Trump got mad, and everybody else got mad. And even today, you just go on any website. So Bannon is saying, don't go to war, it's terrible. Is he then saying, oh, Donald Trump? Of course he is, because he's on that side. And did we see a lot of left-leaning hosts go, oh, well, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are corporate guys and they're bad, but we have to go with them anyway. Yes, we did. But look, you have to be honest about what's actually happening. So if you guys are saying, and I'm not trying to strawman you guys like you did, in my opinion, in the framing of every question.
Oh,
so
Jesus
I'm asking
Christ.
You, are you really
Such
you're
a
saying
baby.
It's all fake, and you think that all these right-wing hosts are not actually anti-war, that this is, but they've been telling their audience now for months that,
Cenk,
that the war is a terrible. Let me ask the question. And that the war is a terrible, terrible, terrible.
You've been talking
idea.
for 5 minutes.
And how would that strategy work? So they get their audience totally against the war, then they capitulate to Trump.
Let me tell you how that strategy
and
works.
How did that help them be pro-war?
Let me explain Let me explain how
My
that
answer to
strategy
your question
works.
is yes, by the way. In 99% of cases, they are just lying,
Let-
and they'll go and suck
Yeah,
Trump off
you're
again.
wrong,
So
Kyle.
let me-
That's
okay.
a real disagreement. That's a
Jake,
real
let me-
They're
disagreement.
already backing off, and the war didn't even start yet. We
Let
didn't
me
even bomb the nuclear
explain
sites yet. They're already backing off.
how this strategy works. Okay, they postured as anti-war because they thought it was a good electoral strategy. So now they have some track record laid of claiming that Trump is the pro-peace candidate. Blah blah blah.
And why was it a good
So
strategy?
and
Because their voters are anti-war.
okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, pulling
That's
wildly
amazing,
at
Daniel.
odds with you, Cenk, on that.
amazing.
We can come back to that in a second. But okay, so they this is the pro-peace ticket, whatever. And I think there were a lot of independents actually who were swayed by that anti-war message, which was completely at
Yes.
odds with reality and with Trump's first term. I think we all agree with that. Okay, so I think there were
Exactly.
independent voters who were swayed by that. Charlie Kirk and others now, to maintain some credibility, they have to postulate, oh, you know, Trump is getting pulled into this, and the neocons are
Yes.
tricking him and confusing
It's
him,
never
etc.
his fault.
But we already
Yeah.
know how this plays out because it's already played out. Trump called Tucker kooky and said he needs to get a TV network, basically saying he's a has-been. Tucker called him to apologize. That was the message, not just to Tucker, but to everybody else. Time to bend the knee, time to get on board. And they did. They did.
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
don't have to guess. It's already happened. It's already
Yeah.
played out.
All right,
They've
good,
already
good,
bent
good.
the knee.
Okay, so we're now actually approaching an actual disagreement rather than the one that was foisted upon me that I did. I don't like. So, all right. So, guys, you think that all these guys and their voters are all liars, and that they're not actually?
I don't know why
anti-
you lump in the voters because
I'm talking about the voters.
Okay, well let's
I'm
talk
mainly
about
talking about the
let's
voters.
Talk about the
Why
voters
do you keep
then.
going back to the
Let me ask you.
politicians
Let me
who are
hold
all
on. Let me
corrupt?
ask you.
Why do
Let me
keep
ask
going
you a
back
really
to
simple
Trump, who's
question.
all corrupt?
Let me
And
ask
make
you a
it
really
seem
simple
like,
question about
oh,
the
yeah,
voters.
well, you of course you like the
Which-
Trump and the Republicans.
Which
Oh, you
party-
trust
that's
them.
not
No, I
what I
don't.
said.
Stop
Which-
saying it.
Cenk,
You said
let
it
me
during the
ask a really
actual
basic
37
question.
to 1 vote. You said how many Republicans voted
Yeah,
for
one.
the war powers? I said one, Tom Massey, and you kept going like, oh, did you know that they didn't? I said yeah. I said
Yeah,
I answered
because
it
they're
from the
fake.
get-go. So
But
yes,
Cenk,
their voters.
let me ask
are
you this
saying
question.
that their voters are not anti-war at all? So be clear.
So let me
because
ask
I
you this
think a
question.
ton of
Let
Trump's
me ask you
voters
this
are
question.
anti-war.
Let me ask
Go
you
ahead.
this.
Cenk has never been this hard with any one of his, MAGA co-parts. His, when he's on with Charlie Kirk, when he's having a conversation with Marjorie Taylor Greene, he is much softer than this. He is fucking belligerent, man. I mean, he looks like his head is about to explode. And these people are on his side. I mean, if Cenk had just come back on this goddamn program and been like, you know what? I gave it an experience. I mean, it was an experiment to reach out to right wingers because I thought maybe that they would be against war and maybe they would see the hypocrisy in Donald Trump and maybe I'd be able to win a couple back on my side. But if you were paying attention even in the least bit, nobody on the right is standing up to Trump. Nobody. You got one libertarian. The rest of them have fallen in line, including your dear Marjorie Greene, where I know she's not your friend, but you had her on your fucking program and you gave her a kid glove massage. Look, I just wanted to see if anything else popped off. Let's go to the end here.
Out and say, hey, let's form an anti-war alliance, there'll be more anti-war.
So I'll tell you what I'm saying. I think that once Trump starts bombing Iran, those numbers we just showed you are correct. So like 70 to 80% of the Republican base will be in favor of it. That's what I'm saying about it. But I want to ask you, when Trump does bomb Iran, do you think the number among Republicans will stay at only 50% supporting it, or is it going to go up to 70 or 80%? Hey guys, this is just a little piece of an hour-long debate.
Look, y'all should check out this whole thing. Go on Krystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. It gets a lot more heated with the other side of the debate when Kyle starts to actually ask him some questions. Krystal was very kind to him. Krystal was very gentle with him. She showed him a couple of his own quotes and tried to point out to him that this experiment of going over to the right wing to try to convince them is a fool's errand. It just is. If you are telling me that you are going after independents, then I would be like, yeah, okay. You could try the centrist approach with centrist and try to convince them that a Democratic politician is going to be more beneficial to them than a Republican one. I can absolutely see that argument. But Cenk saying, I'm going to go over to MAGA because they're all anti-war. They are not. Give these people a couple more weeks and they're going to be doing the Iraq war all over again. The whole, well, we can't have the proof coming in the form of a mushroom cloud. It doesn't take a lot of propaganda to get these people back on the war track. And if Donald Trump is saying that we got to do this, we got to go to war because freedom and America first, they will say, well, I trust the dear leader. You're already seeing the pundits do it. And the MAGA voters, generally speaking, the ones that are unbreakable Trump lovers, they hang on every word of their pundit, the pundits that they watch. So the ones that are yelling at Charlie Kirk right now, they'll fall in line. They will. You're not going to get these people on board. Like I said before, I know plenty of conservative voters, and none of them are pitching a bitch right now about the immigration issue, what ICE is doing. They don't really seem to care very much about foreign policy. And the big, beautiful bill is completely out of their minds because, the distraction every day, the flood the zone, the Steve Bannon flood the zone with all kinds of horrible shit keeps them placated. It's red meat to the masses. So when you are telling everybody and your viewers, don't be Max Left. Don't yell and scream. Honey, the yelling and the screaming actually got Joe Biden voted in as opposed to Donald Trump. When the left is, got their blood up and they're actually fighting, that is when Democrats actually win. If you are playing towards the right wing and you leave your base alone and you let them, just kind of fall away, which, by the way, the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna have done. A lot of their members have left. I stopped watching the Young Turks years ago, mostly because they just kind of seem to come off very centristy. And anytime you have somebody who is a strong leftist, which, by the way, you cannot fight far right-hand people with centrism, because eventually the compromise is in between the centrist and the right-winger. You need, like a proper tug of war, you need somebody on the left pulling hard. So yelling and screaming about somebody who is a socialist because he's just too far to the left. You need somebody that far to the left to pull everybody to the middle. You are not going to be able to pull people to the middle from the middle. You're going to eventually have to compromise. And that's the problem with Cenk. Cenk has been trying to pull people to the middle from the middle for so long that he doesn't realize he is over on the right-hand side of the aisle. And it's really frustrating because, he was a fire breather back in the day. One of the quotes that Kyle said in the second half of the argument, Kyle's like, I used to look up to you, Cenk. When you yelling and screaming at him, he goes, you should break their, because this is a Cenk quote, we break their spine and we drink their spinal fluid and we beat them with the goddamn stick of politics. He goes, and Kyle's like, I am that stick. You used to be that stick. What happened to you, Cenk? Anyway, you should check that out on Substack. Subscribe to Krystal, Kyle and Friends, and go listen to it. It is very fiery, and it's very entertaining. And this is where the fight is on the left. You cannot pull right wingers out of Donald Trump's ass. It's just not going to happen. But what you can do is fire up your base. And if you're really busy trying to win over a handful of people on the right-hand side like Chuck Schumer did back in 2016. He goes, For every leftist and working class person we lose, we pick up a right winger in the suburbs. How did that work out for you, bro? How did that work? Hillary Clinton lost with that strategy. So you inspire your left base. You build them up. You keep them engaged, and they will fight for you. If you go over and play with the right wingers and you don't pay attention to your left base, they will fall off. And they'll feel like they're not really needed and they're not really wanted. And that is the argument that these three are having. And personally, I think that Kyle and Krystal are absolutely right. And Cenk is, he slipped a long time ago. And it's a real shame. Anyway, that's the show for the day. I love you guys very much. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your viewership. And if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, I'd really appreciate that. Hopefully you guys have a wonderful day. And if you're in New York, make sure you get out and vote today. And whatever you do, if you are voting, do not rank Andrew Cuomo. Please. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like and subscribe. Keep rocking.